Yeah, I should have called you. I had to come down with doctor's appointments. I rescheduled all of them because we went back early.
Susie home.
She's out of the hospital.
Did she go into New York or yet? I don't know.
Yeah, we say, you know, it was pneumonia. It's kind of standard operating procedure, how they treat it.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
So it's, but she's better. She takes day at a time, right? Did you go to Kentucky?
Yeah. I missed you there as a 7.
Hey, Michael, can you hear us?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fabulous. And we're just waiting on Gary.
Yeah, Lisa?
Okay. Good morning.
Yeah. He was seeing the doctor on Tuesday. Okay.
All right, we're ready. Let me unmute y'all.
Morning, Trey.
All right, Mr. Lyons, everyone's here except for Gary, and I guess he'll zoom in when he.
Bear with me. I'm looking for my, do you have the agenda?
I got the agenda if you want.
Okay, good. I have it someplace. I got this paperwork. Okay, so,
Oh, that's the May, sorry. Here it is. Just testing you.
thank you. Okay, before we start, do we have, we have Michael, and who else is?
Gary Cantor was supposed to zoom in, but he's not here yet, but you can go ahead and start.
Good morning, Michael. Can you hear us?
No.
Michael?
See
You
the little.
need to unmute yourself, Michael.
Yeah, you got to.
Sorry, yes,
There
sorry.
you go, Michael.
I can hear you.
Are you awake?
I
Okay,
am,
good
yeah.
morning.
Good morning.
Good
morning.
So call the order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cope?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Glennon?
Here.
Chairman Lyons?
Here.
Let it also be noted that Assistant Town Attorney Nazaro, Town Manager Dunham, and myself are also present, absent with notice, but should be here any moment is Gary Cantor.
Okay, the minutes have been distributed. Any comments?
No, I move the minutes be approved as presented.
I'll second.
Mr. Koch? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Glennon?
Yes.
Chairman Lyons?
Yes. Town Manager, Trey, any additions, withdrawals, deferrals, etc.?
No, sir. I did have a PowerPoint that I was thinking about presenting on building height plane, given that we had 2 members that were not present, and with maybe a little bit more work to do on that. I hope to bring that forward for our next meeting if that is something that we want to continue to look into. And again, building height plane is angle of vision, but in a vertical as opposed to a horizontal plane. So thank you.
Trey, have you talked to Palm Beach since our last meeting about that?
Yes, we have.
So it'll be part of that presentation when we see it?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Okay, next meeting date to be decided.
This should be fun.
Could we defer that to the end?
To the
Let's
end,
just
yes, we
see
can.
how we're doing, and then we can make some decision based on progress or lack thereof at today's meeting. Okay. Items by staff. Why don't we start there with your...
Great. So the items by staff is a sort of recap of what we've been discussing. If everyone can just turn to the June 18th memo that was circulated. Does everyone have a copy of that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the first one is building height plane. So as Mr. Smith mentioned, Greg and I have a meeting with the town of Palm Beach. It was via Zoom. Very helpful. A gentleman in their zoning department explained that, of course, angle of vision is the width of a lot. So if you're looking at horizontally, there's an angle that sort of increases that setback the closer you get to the road. So if you imagine like a pie, the further you are, the narrower you are, and then eventually you will be completely wide. So that was something that we believe was largely addressed by by our current setbacks, but that's certainly something that we can continue to look into and apply to maybe some of the lots that we have or the developments that we have now. So again, that would center the closest portion of the building to the front, and as you get further away, it pushes out to the side. So that is sort of most impactful on the street view, but that's something that would be largely, we would be able to apply somewhat uniformly throughout the core, given the lots widths are fairly similar.
And Trey, is it taken from the center point at the front to
Uh,
the back two edges of the lot?
Right. So it's
Back two corners, sorry.
so without
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 PowerPoint,
a
yeah,
diagram,
but
but
just-
if you imagine, just a piece of paper,
Yep.
it would be probably like this, somewhere in the center. I think they allow you to kind of choose where it is to move the house a little bit, but if you imagine, it would. So there's your front setback,
Yep.
and here is your angle of vision, so it prevents you from building out in these areas until you get further back, right? I mean, this is not to scale,
No.
but so there's a portion of the building that could be built here, and you can get wider the further back you get on the lot. So
And the
that's
same thing
essentially.
applies with elevation.
So that's angle of vision. So building height plane is the same concept, except for you're looking at.
Vertical dimension.
They're further back.
So if this is the finished floor elevation,
Yeah.
this is your building height plane, which in the town of Palm Beach is 2 feet setback for each 1 foot of building height. So that would, if you're talking about the maximum building height in Gulfstream of 30 feet, you would have to be 60 feet off the road. Now we have a 30-foot front setback, so that is very significant. In looking at some of the houses that have been recently developed, we're looking at anywhere between 1.5 to 1.75 feet of setback. I think maybe 1.75 is 29. Not sure the address next to you, Mr. Lyons, but the 1-story house that was most recently constructed, and the 2-story houses, the Cat Lady's house, 530 old school. I'm trying to think which other one I looked at are about 1.5 to 1.6 feet per foot of building height as relates to the 2-story portions, right? So again, if you're looking at something like this, the closer you get, the shorter you have to be. So you'd be able to build a 1-story portion here. Your 2-story portion would be pushed further back. So then if this is where you're looking from, the view that you're getting is such that the massing is similar within that plane.
So it would be more restrictive than ours.
So
Sort of in a
currently,
simplistic
the great thing about our code is that it does in some way already address that, because there is a required setback for your second floor already. Right. So in looking at some of the plans over the course of the month, you are looking at an additional 10 to 15, in some cases 20 feet between the first floor portion of the structure, garage or patio or whatever it is, and then the 2-story portion, foyer, or where they decide to put that. Again, second story portion is limited to 50% of the first story portion, so that is typically set back off the front and set back off the sides in some way. So that's so again, that's building height plane. I can bring back a PowerPoint with some recently approved applications or some houses that you believe you would like to have that figure run on, to see if what that is, and if that would be beneficial.
So if this seems there, the height and the width plane seems to push the house back. Are our lots deep enough? I mean, this is going to move the
And-
house
and
back
that-
off the road, don't you think? Both of these issues.
Well, so I've been consistent for
I don't want to steal the show.
5 or 6 years on this very subject,
Uh-huh.
because some people on the commission have suggested we just deal with pushing the house back off the street.
Right.
The house has 4 sides, right? and people live in a house, now all of a sudden, I'm in a 1-story house and they push back this big 2-story house. What happens to my sides? What happens to my light? What happens to the breeze? And so I think it addresses streetscape, but it doesn't address someone's enjoyment of their home. And so I get the streetscape. I think that's important, but it also, how does it impact somebody's use of their home? And the amount of light, the higher you go, the less light you get, particularly if the house is to your south. So I'm not, I think it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's a right concept, but it doesn't accomplish.
Well,
holistically.
we're already doing things that are
Right.
comparable to that with
Yeah.
setback regulations, Okay, but so you were gonna learn a lot about it in a month from now or 2 months from now.
So, I mean, I've already looked into, like I said, a lot of our existing homes and run the specifics, pulled a lot of plans. Where's the setback for the first floor? Where's the setback for the second floor? How that figure plays in. And the calculation is that it would not adhere to the town of Palm Beaches. But if you're looking at a 30-foot tall building set off 60 feet with a 20-foot rear setback and a 100-foot deep lot, I mean, you're really limiting,
Yeah. It's not very-
that.
I'd like you to look into when you do that, like Gulfstream Road, the 100-foot lots, I guess the minimum's 135. How many square feet can you build on 100 by 135?
Yeah.
And then they bump up to say 139 or 140.
That's all.
And then that's about it. And then when you get on the intercoastal, we're talking 100-foot lots. A lot of them are 155, they say, but 5 feet's in the water, and we can't calculate that. And so, how big of a house can we build on the water? And I think the back side of the house on the intercoastal is way set back from the guy across the canal compared to somebody on Gulfstream Road.
Sure.
We got different.
Well, there is a different.
Different property values and costs of the properties.
There's an additional 10-foot setback in the core when you're on the water versus a dry lot.
Rear.
Rear setback.
Right.
So Bill,
Yes, sir.
I think you highlight a key recommendation from the planning gentleman who came about mapping. Because the set of rules or codes or guidelines, whatever you want to call it, not guidelines, codes, they're going to be different. I think that's what we're looking at.
Different
through
areas.
this overlay mapping. And so let's go.
Waterfront, non-waterfront.
Yeah.
100-foot lots. Once you get 150, 175-foot lots, you're in a different ball game. It doesn't.
But would you agree in concept, maybe we should.
So the way that I set up the memo was to talk a little bit about what we were looking at as far as potential tools in the toolbox, and then sort of assigning them, starting with number 4 in the mapping and saying, okay, we've identified some issues that we may want to incorporate. Where do we want to incorporate them? I'm happy to talk about mapping now, but I wasn't sure how to.
Later.
Okay.
Go in sequence.
But I think are we in agreement that we could have a set of codes that would depend on the particular overlay or map?
East or west side of the street even, but
Yeah,
I agree, right? Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Because they are different. You've got to accommodate this difference.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is largely
This is that.
existing in our code. So we want to continue to treat different lots differently with
Yeah.
respect of their unique
Position.
characteristics, whether it's waterfront or anything else. Okay. The next item, if anyone has any other comments about angle of vision or building height plane, we'll continue to work on that. If you can reach out to Renee with houses that you believe are ideal candidates, we can do the building height plane and angle of vision or something comparable to that on those and provide those as part of next month's meeting. Okay. So next we're looking at incentives for.
Can I?
Yes.
It just occurred to me. So this angle of vision, I'm thinking that in terms of streetscape, if I was looking again from the street, and it's a 1-story versus a 2-story that's set back at the same number of feet from the street, the 2-story is going to look bigger by definition, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it will.
Because it's
So my point is, on this building height plane, I could see how I would almost have 2 sets of rules for that setback based on a 1-story versus a 2-story.
Sure. And one of the things that was swirling around in my mind is whether or not we regulate 1-story homes with angle of vision and building height plane, or if we just leave it as is. And we just do that for 2-story homes to make sure that they are, building in a manner that's respective of our massing concerns.
No one's really fussing about the 1-story homes any place, are they?
but also we say that we're trying to incentivize people to go down
To go to 1-story.
Yes.
Which
And that's the next.
which a lack of regulation would
Yeah.
be an incentive. Well, building height plane, you don't have to worry about that if you're building a single story.
and your angle's different and you can come in.
Right.
Yeah.
On the clarification on a height plane, you're talking 30 feet. Are we talking 30 feet to the top of the roof? And in the past, we had another 5 feet for a chimney or some.
So
What are we talking?
right. So I believe the town of Palm Beach includes your ornamental chimneys and things when I was doing the calculation, because then I'd have to figure out where the chimney was located and how many feet back it was. I just did the roof height as indicated on the plan.
Because when we play with that, cosmetic all
Sure,
chimneys are
sure.
anyway. Most of them aren't real chimneys. They're all, vented or whatever anymore. People don't have fire. With the height, if you go from 30 down to 25, then we come back to how high are the ceilings going to be in the home? And we were addressing that. I don't know if this is the time you want to get into that. How thick it is between the floors. Are they trade ceilings? Or, can we go and scissor in the truss of the roof? You don't want to get it where everybody has ceiling heights as high as this in here for your home. Those days are 1970.
Sure. And I'm just leaning on the testimony or statements from the architects that sort of indicated that our building height is where it needs to be, respective of the ceiling heights that are expected at the price point that you're looking at.
And so we're getting back to 30 feet.
So right, and 30 feet
roof.
is for
Roof height.
for two right for roof
Without
height
chimney
for 2
ornaments
stories.
on it.
Correct.
That's how people are going to build them. They aren't going to have
Right.
So I'm going to give you a different perspective. Again, we're talking about sanitizing for 1-stories, create this incentives for 2-stories. I think depending on the mapping area of the district, we might want to have lower heights. And again, that's an option that you can build a 1-story house and have all high ceilings. So if you want to go up, then, because as you lower the second, the height of the building, by definition, that's going to reduce the massing. And so I want to leave it on the table that we may want to reduce that in certain of the districts or sub-districts or maps.
Or maybe you'll get a second floor that's the same height as the first floor, But instead of the roof having a pitch, it'll be more of a flat.
Yeah.
They won't have much of a pitch to it.
Sometimes
I don't know.
architecture, you're right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, I
You
just
know,
thinking
you know,
ahead,
it's
is that
a roof,
gonna, we got trade-offs.
Oh, I know, I
then
agree.
you got a house.
Then you have all the houses look,
Yeah.
like pancakes.
Yeah.
That's not
You
good.
see, you're being more generous than I am. I would keep the pitch, just you have to have a lower ceilings.
Okay.
Okay.
We know where
I
the
mean,
pitch,
I don't know if
who built the
that
big
sells.
house out on Perry?
Well, we're gonna disagree on some things.
Yeah, no, I don't know if that's sells, people in the town. And when you do all this, you got to remember, as we touch, maybe we got to wait to FAR to somebody to stop it. We have a town that we want to have a place you can raise a family, and that's usually 2 adults, 2 or 3 children. So we need enough square footage on a small lot to be able to do that on the interior lots. And you need to have enough outside in the front, talking cosmetically with, terracing or whatever, that you have places for cars. Because the parents are both going to have a car. Everybody in town might have a caregiver or a maid. That's 3 cars. And you throw one more in for one of the 3 kids or 2 kids. And so 2 will be inside in the garage, hopefully. And so we got to have enough area without all concrete out or asphalt out front so they can park the maid. Because last meeting people complain about it, we all do, the lawn people, and they need their space. So we can't park on the street. So when we do our setbacks, maybe some of this will help with setbacks. We have more place for cars.
And we're gonna get into FAR, so.
I know,
Yeah, I guess I want to
we're
continue.
talking
because
height and size.
That's really an elephant in the room, in my opinion. But let's stay on your.
Okay.
So we're still incentives for one.
So, right. So that's what we're looking at. So one of the things was discussed was modifying the allowance of covered unenclosed area. So that would essentially increase the FAR, but it would have to be unenclosed, right? So you're talking about a loggia, something like a patio that is covered. So currently, the special exception that allows an extra 300 square feet has the offset. So you have to, for every 1 square foot, you have to have 2 square feet within the maximum permitted FAR that are also unenclosed. So that reduces your air conditioned space. So we could modify that to increase the number from 300. We could make it an automatic extra 300 without any offset for 1 stories, something like that. Currently, a lot of our projects have a significant amount of covered unenclosed area because you want to entertain and be outside in your pool and have something covered. So that to me would be beneficial, but would not increase the walls that are around the building. So I don't know if that's something that we want to sort of keep on the table, or invite any discussion on that.
So help me understand. So you have a house with enclosed FAR of 5,000. I'm just going to grab a number. How much would be unenclosed? So you said there's a lot of houses have a lot of unenclosed. How much are we talking about?
I mean, I would have to look at certain plans, but very frequently you have, I don't know if staff would opine on this. We look at so many plans. Every application that we see has some sort of covered area, whether it's a balcony or really largely to entertain out by the pool. I mean, you're not going to want to sit out there in the sun baking without any sort of cover. So that is sort of eating into your FAR. You can't use that for air conditioned space.
But what I mean, so here's the reason for my question is for this incentive to really work, it's got to be meaningful. It can't be just a token number.
Correct.
It's got to be meaningful. Otherwise.
Well, we do have, I mean, and we had it, within the last couple of years, every application that we saw for a new home wanted an extra 300 square foot of FAR, and they were willing to compromise with that extra 600. So they would end up with a project with 900 square feet of covered but unenclosed open area. And they would incorporate that into, into the front area with an entryway, into the rear. If it's a 2-story structure, they'd have, a balcony or something that was covered, and they would be happy to do that to get that extra 300. So if we remove for single-story structures the requirement to offset it, sort of just automatically get the 300, that is, to me, based on the applications that I've seen, a significant nudge to encourage 1-story homes.
So remove the offset
Yeah, for single stories.
For single stories only. And again, we're only talking about within the core.
Yep.
So first off, the universe that we're talking about is the core. And then when we go into mapping, we'll see if there are any additional. But
I agree with concept. I just wonder if it's enough. So it's just a question.
You mean enough instead of
Yeah,
300
square
or
feet.
500?
I mean, on my house, I can build 5,500 square feet, and for another 300 feet, am I going to make a decision about for 1-story, 2-story based on that 300? Probably not.
Probably not, no.
So, and that's my point. So, but this is a work in process.
Yeah, we're working toward.
But they all ask for it though,
Yeah.
so it must be popular.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
right.
people
Because they
want
want to
it.
maximize.
They ask for it because we give it to them. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I'm not sure it's going to swing the decision 1-story, 2-story. That's my
What
point.
sort of number do you think, Paul, would incentivize you? 500?
I'm thinking, about 10% of the total square footage you could have, or some number like that.
Well, we
So-
gotta go look at some houses in the field and see how
Yes.
much you really see it.
Right. No, I agree.
And
I think
I have a lot of overhang in my house, and nobody complains about it. And it was built a long time ago, and we use it. It's, we love it because we have a balcony over the second part and it goes all the way across. And when I built it, all that was considered AC space. I mean, no, that's wrong. When we came to rebuild it, all AC space, and it killed the deal. Forget it. You know what I mean? So you got to look at it and see.
Yes.
It's all in the eyes of the beholder. And one house it might look good, and the next one it might look bad, and then you can figure out what size 300, 500, 600, or whatever it is when you visualize it, and then we have an educated.
Right.
Pulling out the
I think
figure.
your house might be a good example. We could get those.
I don't know. You come over any time.
No, but I mean, in terms of total square footage, how much do you have covered but unenclosed?
Right. That's what. Yeah.
I don't know what
I
that
can
percent-
take pictures and show you sometime and go. And how do we consider eaves now? At one time, eaves were considered AC space.
It depends
Now it's not.
I think it's 1.5 feet. I forget what the code
Yeah,
is, but
okay.
you're allowed a certain amount.
So
But then if it's
walls
greater
don't
than
go
that,
straight up, and there's no overhang. Yeah. Okay.
So, Troy, Troy, I think our experience of people coming in here asking for the 300 square feet, most of them are 2-story homes. Right?
Are they?
Yeah.
well,
I
I think most that we're, I don't know if it's most that we're seeing now. We haven't seen a ton of new applications
Well,
the last
and they don't give
year or
them for
two.
new homes. They don't like to give them for new homes.
Correct. So one of the things that I'll mention is that within that special exception that we're talking about is the specific caveat that the roof projections shall not make the structure look more massive. So if that is a concern that we have, we can allow the extra 10% or whatever the number is, with the caveat that the extra FAR or the extra covered unenclosed shall not make the structure look more massive, so we can make sure that it's allocated in a way that's respectful of the massive concerns.
That's a fairly quantifiable
Yeah, I don't
qualitative
know
term.
that.
That's a qualitative
Uh,
term.
it-
I think it's there, and Tom thinks it doesn't. Yeah.
It's within the code
Yeah.
currently.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I guess now we're on to B.
So the next one is increasing the maximum lot coverage. So I tried to work with Mr. Glennon on providing him some lot coverage, but I failed terribly. we were looking for sort of an average of lot coverage that is not the house. So you're talking about driveway, pool, deck, all of your areas that are not that are not the house, but that are not open landscaped area. So I don't know at this point. I can't speak intelligently about that. But if you are utilizing an incentive to increase covered area, that is going to eat into your pool deck and your driveway and the size of those items. So sort of part and parcel to that was whether or not, if you allow more, should you increase the maximum lot coverage currently at 60% with 40% required to be landscaped open area?
Oh, and I think that's a great exercise. And I just think back to, I think what you've said, Michael, Bill said, I mean, we need sort of real examples. I mean,
Right.
let's take some house, you take my house, whatever, and let's just look at how much. I mean, I don't know what a typical pool is, and I don't know how much the driveway takes, because those are the two areas that I don't know.
Sure. Some of our recent applications, and it may be most of them, but the ones that come to mind are very close to the maximum. I mean, unless you're talking about a huge lot, they're close to the maximum lot coverage. So if you are allowing more FAR, you're reducing the amount of size of a pool and pool deck and things like that. So we didn't want that to be that the incentive to get more covered unenclosed to then eat into other things that were desirable.
I agree with that.
So that's going to have to be looked at and something we can continue
Okay,
to
good.
entertain.
That's key. I mean, we don't want to create an incentive that becomes a disincentive in other areas, right?
Right.
Good question.
I don't have anything else under incentives for one-story homes. Is there anything that the committee thinks that we should look into or address that may encourage people to build a single story? I just want to note that obviously we have an end user in Mr. Cantor who decided to build a single story in the core on Palm Way. And then we also have the house next to Mr. Lyons, which was not an end user, but was a spec, and also built a single story. So I don't know how those worked or why that was the case, but those were two successful, I believe from a community characteristic standpoint, two successful single story homes.
So incentives for one story in a vacuum is only part of the question. It's relative to the two-story. What are the rules that govern a two-story and setbacks versus a one-story? So I think we have to look at that. So maybe it's disincentives on two stories, but I might allow a little more setback, reduce the setback on a one story versus on the first floor versus a two story, or on a two story, increase the setbacks. Those are the things I think we need to consider. So you got these set of codes for the different mapped areas, and we're going to have a set of rules that govern two-story, one-story in each of those special districts or whatever you want to call them. That's my perspective. So we'll get into that, but I can't think of anything by itself. We would allow more lot coverage.
Mm-hmm.
We'll allow more square footage. I mean, I don't know. Would we allow a little more enclosed square footage?
Yeah, if we reduce the setbacks on a single story, to your point, Paul, if they've got a double story, and you know, how do we stop people looking down, stopping people's privacy and things like that? If we increase the setback even by a foot, reduced it all the way around a property, yes, we're increasing the FAR for a single something's going to be. I'm interested about this trigger that would make you think, you know what, it's worthwhile. Because at the end of the day, it's what's going to be the perception to an architect and owner that says, yeah, I want to do that. You know, we can do all the numbers and things, but it's really down to what's really going to be the trigger that somebody says, absolutely, I want a one story. You know?
Well, if you have a one-story house and you have a view, let's say we have a view and people pay for views. If you have a one-story house and you can, making this up, you can have your kitchen, and we don't have living rooms, but you have your kitchen, your family area, whatever. You have a den in the master bedroom. That's 4. We're pushing it on a 100-foot lot, looking out at something with a view, the golf course or the waterfront or something. Somebody's real happy because they pay for the view. And if you can push them as close to the property line that everybody agrees, hey, I get what I want. The kids, they don't have to see the view. Now, if you get something and you have it narrower, and you can only have the kitchen, your library, and a big great room, well, you're going to want your master bedroom upstairs with the bath. I'm making this up. The bath upstairs, so I get a view out of my bath, out of the bedroom, of the water, and I get enjoy upstairs sitting, watching TV, looking out at my beautiful view, because you look over, into the water. And so if we make it wide enough, in theory, I can get on the first floor, I'm happy. If not, we sort of push it up.
Yeah.
I'm with what you say.
So Bill, on your second floor, looking out, and I'm sitting around my pool swimming. You want to look at me?
At a certain point, no, I can see the concern there very much, but at a certain point, buy a double lot. You know what I mean? We can't kill everybody, and I'm not talking about you, because somebody don't want you looking. Well, that's what a 2-story house is. Of course you're going to see out the front. I can look further. Bill, not talking about me, but everybody can. The Orthwines, everybody.
When we get into the mapping, I think very clearly there's going to be a perspective to that for those houses having those views.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm just bringing up.
Set of rules.
So we encourage a one-story like Malcolm. We all agreed to would look so much. When you get older, everybody one story anyway.
Yep.
But if you pay a lot of money, you want a view, you're going to go up a story. So we want to give them the incentive. Oh, maybe I should stay on the first floor. That's what we're trying to achieve. That helps people from not looking over.
Yeah. Okay.
So before we move on to anything else, I want to maybe talk about, since we're talking about incentivizing single stories, maybe what we can do to discourage 2-story homes. I also want to invite Mr. Glennon. He always has something insightful to say. And when we met in between our last meeting, we were talking about sort of what the expectation is when you have a family and a certain amount of bedrooms. So, I think that he could provide some insight on the discussion about disincentives and FAR. So as far as, I'll just call them disincentives for 2-story homes, one would be, we currently regulate 2-story homes a number of ways, with side setbacks, front setbacks of the 2-story portion. One of the things that we have is a 50% rule, where 50% of your first floor can be on the second floor. Would there be interest in, because a lot of the massing is, on the top of the structure, decreasing that to less than 50%. And, would that work? Again, we can look at figures. Mr. Glennon actually has built a spreadsheet where we can plug these figures in based on your lot size, and it'll give you an idea of the amount of square footage that would be permitted on this second story based on that sliding scale, whether it's 50% or 40% or 30% or what have you. So if that's something, the committee would be interested in, or if we feel like 50%, it is, I think across all the districts.
I've given a lot of thought to that. And I look at that question in the context of not just the square footage, but the setbacks. The setbacks, I think, more meaningfully impact the massing from all four sides. Now, that may translate into, I mean, I could translate that into, I could take a specific lot, work on the setbacks, and then that could tell me how much square footage I could get. But I think it's more the setbacks than the square footage, in my opinion. One of the houses that I'm recommending is one that we might want to populate when houses get rebuilt is on Gulfstream Road on the corner of Banyan. It's I don't know who owns it. Here.
Banyan and Gulfstream.
So if you know where April lives,
Yeah.
Vestige, immediately across the street in the south, or it's immediately to the east of Moroni.
Yeah.
And it's a nice two-story house, but they have a section of a two-story that sits nicely on top of the building. And my perspective on the setbacks is, if you have a plane, look at a plane on the second story, and if you're looking from all four sides, you want a corridor that's open. So it provides the privacy, it provides the light from the street, it provides a lower massing impact. So I think the setback on the second floor is really the key driver in terms of massing and how massing impacts streetscape and the enjoyment of the home by the person who's living there. So,
well, we have that 50% restriction on the second floor, but what about, is there a mandatory setback on all four sides now?
Yes.
What is it? Do you remember?
Well, on the second floor, it's a minimum. We have a formula that
say they're right to the lot line on the lower floor.
Yep.
Okay, so they're 15 feet off the side.
15%.
Right, so then they go up, and at the second floor, what is the minimum setback you have to have for the second floor? Forgetting the 50% limitation, you have to come in 10 or 15 feet, Trey, do you know?
Yeah.
I know we can't go straight up, and then we got those rules.
We have a formula.
So the side elevations are 15% of the width of the first story. So that the first story is 50 feet, you have to take 15% of that number, so 7.5 feet.
On either
7.5 feet
On either side.
On
Yes.
either side.
Yes.
Okay.
Minimum.
minimum.
Because
Minimum,
we
yes,
gave the
right.
option to the architects of moving that 50%.
Around a little bit,
Around.
but it has to be at least 7.5 feet
Yeah.
setback in that example.
So I would want to take a couple of houses and see how much more we can push it back.
Yeah, I mean, but the second floor usually is just a whole bunch of bedrooms, right? 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, sometimes the master, sometimes, office space, but
That is,
you gotta be careful, you don't make it so darn, I don't wanna completely block people from doing two-story homes. You wanna make it usable. It needs to be big enough to be usable. And how big is your upstairs? You got 2 or 3 bedrooms upstairs?
I have 3 bedrooms and 3 baths.
Mhm. And I think 2 stories are more important on the waterfront areas too. So I think that's why we're gonna have mapping.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. By the way, almost all my comments, and I've been myopic in my comments. I'm looking at everything from the west side of Polo to the east side of Gulfstream, that corridor.
right,
That's what I've been really focusing
Yep.
on.
I
And
agree.
maybe that's why we need to.
Well, like the lot size is, I guess, the smallest one here,
Yeah,
roughly
I think-
135.
Deep, Billy?
Yeah, the depth of the ones on the west side range from, roughly 135 to 139.
That's on the
137 on the west side
of Gulfstream.
of Gulfstream Road.
They get that shallow.
Yeah, they get that shallow by 100 feet wide. When
Right
you
in
go,
here?
yes, right here,
Right in
all
here.
these here.
Okay.
When you go on the west side of that little area that we're talking about, east of Polo, where Paul lives,
They're deep.
they average they're all 100 feet per se.
Mhm.
And they average 166, 165, 168. Those, so they're 30 plus feet roughly deeper than they are on the east side of, behind Paul's backyard. So maybe we should have somebody figure out how big of a house we can build on that lot, how big of a house on Paul's lot, 1-story and 2-story, and figure out a 2-story, 1-story and 2-story on the intercoastal without the 5 feet, meaning 150-foot lot by 100, and maybe 160-foot lot by 100, like our friend Gary, and then we can figure out our setbacks and maybe the massing a little easier.
So a different depth of lots.
I got all the depths here.
Look at the difference range.
And then you'll have one row on the west side of Gulfstream Road and on the east side of Polo.
So let's,
Mr. Glennon turned his mic on. Do you have something to say, Mr. Glennon?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that's kind of the Bill. What you're talking about is more or less kind of the worksheet that I've been working with Trey and putting together. So
Good.
I can kind of using that as guidance. I think it needs just a little bit cleaning up. But I think that we should, or it's probably very close to being able to show exactly what you talked about, kind of different examples, what the current code would allow you to do from an FAR perspective or a sizing perspective, and then taking, having different input tweaks that, a lot of which we just talked about, and that if you were to tweak these 3 sections of the code or whatever, however many, based on, you just essentially a different input, what would that allow you to do from an FAR so you can compare it? What it doesn't do is the setback, like, it'll show you what the square footage is, but it won't show you what that square footage looks like, i.e. like how do you lay it out? Like it's not going to be a visual of like the difference between a first floor.
It's a number, but that number is extremely helpful because we're talking about usable space and allowing, not being too restrictive. But
Yeah.
okay, so can we, I think in our discussion so far, we've highlighted the fact that we want to have a different set of codes for different sub-districts, or what do we call those? What do you want to, what's the term we want to use?
overlay.
Overlay.
Okay, overlay. So would you help me on point 4, one little I? I was a little confused by what you said there, but
I believe that's consistent with what you
okay, so
understand it to be. So it is the homes between Polo on the west to Gulfstream Road on the
Polo on the west.
So essentially, you're looking at
Cool.
all of
Yes.
your dry lots along Polo,
Yeah.
from Gulfview to Old School,
Yes.
all the lots along Gulfstream Road as well. So this corridor here,
Okay.
and
that's what you.
that's really what we're talking about.
Okay.
Now there are some along Oleander and but largely it's this main corridor that we're talking about. Nothing east of Gulfstream Road because those are
Right,
Ocean West.
Right. Good.
And then the smaller lots on Oleander also are kind of different than what we're talking about. So in all of our conversations, that's really what I've been keying in on,
Okay.
but I didn't want to.
So let's print out for the next meeting this and actually color code it or somehow designate. So very clearly, for me, visuals are easier to follow. And I think that's what you said in your memo. I just wasn't certain. So that's one. Is everybody in agreement with that one corridor? Is a
Yeah.
separate?
Yep.
And Trey, I'll let you
All the way
finish,
to
and then we
Old
need to
School.
go to the Polo cottages.
for the most part.
Yeah, then you got the few cottages, Tom Stanley and.
Right. So there are not many there, and the lots are a little differently sized. So I didn't know if we wanted to include those in the overlay district under 4A1 and just allow them to exist as they currently are with those regulations. You know, I do believe, like I said, those lots are smaller because they're divided by oleander.
So you would want to make it the same overlay.
So I'm saying I would exclude that
Exclude it.
as different enough to not really warrant the same sort of attention.
Restrictions.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry,
There's
bottom
only
line,
like
you're
5
gonna have a
houses.
separate.
Yeah, I mean, they're different
There's
size
5
lots.
houses.
We shouldn't hurt them.
I'm sorry, Trey, I'm
You know,
losing.
So I don't believe that they are similar enough to warrant the same inclusion in
Okay, so you want to create a different overlay.
either a different overlay or leave
Just
them
leave 'em alone.
alone
As
as
is.
currently regulated by the code. But I didn't want to exclude them. I wanted to have a conversation with the committee before making that
Okay, so
decision.
what's the view on these?
What about those houses on Oleander, between Oleander and Gulfstream Road? There's like, one of them is Michael's, in fact, right? Those 4 houses right there. Paul, from the spec house that was on the corner that Devitt and his group built
the south end where Mike is.
to Michael, you know, there's that, these
There-
right in here.
Sure, from 34, 33 on the north, which is the one on the southeast corner of Banyan and Lakeview to
Correct.
Mr. Glennon's house there
But
at
some of them been
101.
combined.
Yeah, I mean, they're similar to this look. They face onto it's just east of Maroney. Paul,
Yeah, I
and
know,
all the
I
way down to Michael, you know, that stretch. Wouldn't they be very similar to what we're trying to do in this one rectangle?
I agree with you. I think those 4 houses could be included in that.
In that, yeah. Not the
I
next group
do
up,
agree.
not the old cottages, the Stanley and
And it
April
makes sense
Vestige
because
one.
of the juxtaposition. They're actually next to them.
Yeah.
You're right.
They are right there. So the
Yes.
difference that I'm seeing is that you have Mr. Glennon's house, which fronts on Lakeview.
Mhm.
So any issues that you're taking from the front is less impactful because really the side elevation is along Gulfstream Road. Then you have Mr. Mazzio directly north. That is a very shallow lot that's wide. So you are going to be able to locate that a little bit differently on the lot.
Okay. So
But certainly its orientation is different enough to warrant its exclusion, and just in my opinion.
okay.
The lot immediately to the north of that is extremely small, so really not, I think it's a non-conforming. And then again, the lot on the far north, I think has, I think it's,
I'm with
again,
you. I agree with you. So we're just
Okay.
stick with your big rectangle to
Good.
begin with.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay.
But let's go to the polo cottages. I'm not too preoccupied with this subject. On the other hand, I mean, they are sort of very unique. And I mean, if we started putting some pretty big homes there, I don't know. I mean, the size of those lots are probably not so different than this corridor we've been talking about. Maybe we include them in that. I mean, what happens if that?
So it could be beneficial. I'm looking at,
Oh, yeah, sure is. April Vestige's house.
so her, right,
It's
right.
pretty big, yeah.
So her house was built in 1938.
Yeah.
So that is certainly within the concept of historic
Yeah,
designation.
historic.
So I think that if we want to look at potentially allowing some sort of historic designation, that would allow her house, and I believe maybe Tom Stanley's his was 1927. So allowing those structures to continue to exist without running into FEMA issues for substantial improvement could be beneficial. So
I'm in favor of that, but let's really, I think we really need to look at all the pros and cons. I mean, I mean, that's a pretty strong change. I mean, could you just tear that house down and do whatever you wanted? in
Sure.
this historic
Yeah,
district?
of course you could.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you
Okay.
could.
I
They
think
have that right.
I think that it.
So that's what
So
we need
right,
to-
so I'm not 100%
We need to
sure.
find-
I think that we could probably allow a homeowner to designate their home as historic under our regulations. And if we are the one who is creating those regulations, I imagine we can allow the structure to be demolished. So we're not requiring that structure to exist in perpetuity. But we would allow that as a tool if they wanted to preserve it to not run into
Okay.
FEMA issues.
Okay.
So we recently had the Lemon Hill house, and I was concerned about the value. I mean, because they're doing so much work there, but they are. I mean, it's called Lemon Hill for a reason. They are very high up, so they did not run into any FEMA issues, but certainly they would have, and it would have been just sinful to just require that to be demolished, given that it's a 100-year-old house.
What house is this?
A Lemon Hill, it's behind, it's on Hidden Harmer down on the south side of town.
It's very high. Yeah.
You're really high.
Okay, so I'm good with that overlay historic. We just need to define it.
Yeah, I was going to say, what
So-
sort of numbers
so-
are we talking about?
When I was looking at the town of Palm Beach code,
Yep. They have historic,
so they have historic districts, but they also have like a program where you can apply to be a historic structure that's not part of the district. So I don't think that we necessarily want to have a district, but we would maybe have the ability to designate your structure as historic. And as long as we follow whatever the guidelines are for FEMA to make sure that that structure meets those requirements, to be excluded from the floodplain and everything.
Have you any idea what the criteria would, or what are the criteria in Palm Beach? You just turn around and wake up one morning and say, okay, I've got it.
So there are a number of things, and you're really putting my short-term memory to the test. The structure would have to be 50 years old or more, which, I mean, this is 2024. We're talking about 1970s at this point. Be significant by who built it, significant to the community for some reason. Obviously, Polo Cottages, I mean, that is the history of Gulfstream, so that I would meet. So there's a number of different criterias. Like an important person lived there, or a noted architect had designed it, things like that.
Okay, so let's just blow this out. So I think we all agree that we want.
Well, I will research the historic preservation requirements and provide you with, I think that the guidance is that we're going to recommend moving forward with that as a potential for some homes. We just need to figure out what the criteria is, and I'll just make sure that.
And although we're focusing on
That's
this
something we
area,
can
would
do.
that be Plaza Soleil across the board?
So I would think that we would open that up to anyone as long as it meets the criteria.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's up to the property owner to
To-
decide.
cor-
Otherwise,
Right. I would
we're
not,
going to get in a big
you know,
mess with the city.
well, in your,
Force.
I've heard stories about one of our former mayors who did not want to just kind of bully people into historic designations, because then it potentially devalues property. The way that we're trying to figure this out, you would be the person who makes the application and says, I want to be a historic structure, and therefore I have different rules and regulations. I have to respect the architectural style and be in
They're
keeping with
happy,
it.
and they get all the
But-
benefits of taxation or whatever they could, and then when they pass title on to the next owner, they have to live with it,
By the way,
right? Yeah, I mean, they can't
They can't
terminate
opt
it.
out. They can't opt out. Once you're in,
Right.
you're locked in.
Oh,
Once you're in,
that's,
you're in.
see, that's what I don't know
If they can.
if you can get out.
Okay,
Correct.
that's
Yes.
interesting.
I agree with
I
this
hear you.
discussion, but just
I'm sorry.
as a footnote, historic district does not necessarily decrease value. Some of the most expensive homes in the United States are on Main Street in Southampton, and those houses cannot be torn down. They have to be maintained, and they get lifted up, they get redone, and but the exterior doesn't change a bit. So now that town is a hell of a lot older than this town, but
Well,
I'm not against this discussion. I just want to be sure that, historic isn't necessarily by itself a bad thing.
no, it's not a bad thing at all. I just didn't want us to get in,
Is it a different tax point?
yeah, you get a different tax base going in there.
Yeah, I
Because
guess.
if somebody, some builder comes in here and said, oh, I want to buy that lot, I can build, I'm making 12,000 square foot house. It has a lot more value to the end user than it does that 1930 whatever house that's there now. And who knows how much it is up to code. There is a value difference. Now, if you live in Charleston, South Carolina, we have these beautiful row houses, that, God, you'd probably love to have one. You'd pay anything to have one,
That's right. That's right.
But, this isn't Charleston. I'm not saying I'm all for this idea. I'm just going with our eyes open,
Yep.
Two little, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Paul, I really like the fact that you're putting it on the homeowner to be the one who's proactively applying. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense because they are essentially they go in, the family, whomever, would go in eyes wide open on what are the implications for long-term value if I want to sell down the road and I carry this historical designation, which is going to put different construction restrictions potentially on the house, but with the plus side of being able to do different type of renovations that might not have to conform to the existing FEMA FEMA standard.
Correct.
So
Right.
I think as long as I think the application and putting it on the homeowner is something that would be probably pretty popular with some people to say yeah, I would like to, because that would allow me to make some different choices with my house and do so in a way that's kind of conforming to what our goals are on the committee to ensure that we're keeping the character, the character of the neighborhood, single story homes, etc.
A lot of people have done that in Delray, as we know, and it's been very successful with the older homes in Delray.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people love it, and it's a great idea.
Oh, and that's how that works in Delray? Actually?
Well, I can't say exactly how it works, but they get their benefits
Right.
and their taxation benefits, and they go.
You might want to look into
like
that.
Tom Crocker.
Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's good example.
Okay, and so now we're on to 3i, and basically is that everything?
Essentially all the wet lots.
Yeah.
So, and I
Yeah, that's
it
fine.
was my understanding that those would be excluded and that it wouldn't apply,
Exactly.
but I didn't want to, again, do that without the committee's understanding that's what your desire was, that we were really not considering the end lots. They do have less of an impact because to get to a lot of those homes, you have to drive through a dead end, whereas Polo and Gulfstream Road, everyone drives on those roads in the community. So I didn't know if that was enough to warrant a difference. And also, the lots are different, and their impact is different in development.
And they have, the perspective of these views, which we don't have on the interior corridor. So I think it should be different. I don't think, in fact, I just think we just leave that alone. We don't create
Just no overlay for that.
Right.
Just exclude it. Okay.
Trey,
So-
Trey, one question I would have is I would say if it's something where the other zones are being more restricted, I could understand that. But if it's something where it allows a little bit more first floor area, if someone chooses a first floor, I'm not sure why it wouldn't be helpful to the town and also to the homeowner, especially if it's just increasing the size of a covered outside area or something.
Okay.
I'd be inclined to favor that approach of creating incentives with no additional changes or disincentives for a two-story. If you follow what I just said. Basically, what I think Gary is saying, let's create some incentives to build a one-story. And I think it's mostly going to be through this covered but unenclosed, and make that an option for somebody in that.
So
I think that's what Gary, is that what you were saying?
It is. I was thinking more like if there's some incentives for sort of the small one eye, that it probably should apply to those as well. If it helps people build one story, I think it still helps on
I
those.
agree with that.
So what I'm hearing is for changes to the code encouraging one-story homes, those would be suggested district-wide throughout the core. Is that correct?
I think that's probably a better way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
I mean, this is a work in process. We might reflect further on and make some other changes, but I think that's
Great.
let's
Thank you.
consider it. I'd like to get, to a point where we have sort of a little bit of a form picture, and then we can massage it further. We're going to go to FAR, and let's conclude no later than 10. FAR.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and look at that. So currently the maximum FAR is 1/3 of your lot size for the first 20,000 square feet. I want to jokingly call it the Paul Lyons Overlay District, but I won't say that because then it'll stick. The overlay district that we're looking at, not a lot of the lots are over 20,000 square feet, maybe one or two, if any. So you're pretty much taking your straight 1/3. Anything over 20,000 square feet has a reduced sliding scale FAR where you only get 20%. So the larger lot, sort of the smaller percentage of the house can be there. So that is already sort of a concept that, the bigger the lot, the sort of smaller percentage of home based on the lot size. Currently, we have all the lots in the core with the 0.33. So the size of your lot really dictates with a straight 1/3 what your floor area ratio can be. Floor area ratio, as Mr. Koch mentioned, does not account for your eaves, but it does count your covered unenclosed area. So that's something that we were talking about a little bit earlier with adjusting that. You have a lot of provisions in the code that dictate where that can be, whether it's setbacks for the second story, 50% on the first versus the bottom floor. But largely that's a number, and the smaller that number gets, the smaller the structure is going to be. I was talking with Mr. Lyons before the meeting about building height plane and how that pushes it further back on the lot. And he said, sure, but at the end of the day, if your FAR number is smaller, there's going to be less impact, because if you push it off the front, it's going to then loom over the sides or the rear of the lot as opposed to just the front. And, one of our popular sayings around here is there are four sides to a building. So a lot of the times Renee will chastise someone that, you're not putting shutters on the sides of the building. Well, that is part of the building, and we do, regulate that. So to Mr. Lyon's point, there are four sides to a building, and especially when you're looking at the area that we're looking at, a lot of those two-story portions are going to loom over the rear or the sides in some way, especially if you're pushing them off the front. It's got to go somewhere. So with that, we can have a conversation about any adjustments to FAR that the committee would be interested in entertaining.
Okay, so I'll start. Perspective. Trey pointed this out to me this morning in a discussion we were having, that when this code was developed, what it provided for were homes that were much bigger than the typical home in the core district.
Mhm.
Kind of curious why that was done that way. So just a perspective, not a conclusion. You've heard me say this, and I apologize for repeating it, but in the village of Southampton, their FAR, as it would apply to my property, is 20% less. Kind of curious why it works there. I'm moving away from advocating reducing FAR as long as we can accomplish the task of reducing the massing. And reducing massing is trying to minimize the amount of square footage on the second floor, and particularly on the setbacks, that it doesn't interfere with people's enjoyment and our streetscape is preserved. So if we can do that without reducing FAR, I'm fine as one participant. I'm not against reducing FAR, but I realize it's more of a challenge, but I mean, Delray recently reduced the FAR in some of the oceanfront homes. Now, is that a good parallel? I don't know. But the concept is that people do reduce FAR. It's not a cardinal sin. I'm not promoting it as long as we can figure out a way of trying to reduce, dampen the massing. And I think the key way to do that is try to minimize the amount of square footage and on setbacks on the second floor. So that's my view.
Yeah, I'm not for reducing it, Paul. The trouble is that land, let's say a vacant lot in Gulfstream now is what's driving people to build the bigger homes, I think. If it's, let's say $3 million for a lot or something like that, you're not going to build a 2,200 square foot house on it because the next person is going to tear that down to build 4,500 square foot house or something.
They're doing that every day in Southampton.
In the early days, people just built the size of the home that they needed to live in. I mean, because the lots weren't $3 million, but now any architect or builder is going to tell you, have we had anything come through here that was less than the maximum they could build in a while?
No.
I don't think so, have we?
No.
No, and so it's kind of being driven by the land cost. That's the problem. So I agree. I don't really think you pinch it down. I think that we maybe work more on the second floor. How many two-story houses are there in the Lions, what are we going to call it?
Lions District.
I can tell you it's less than 10%. And the ones that were built, Sheila, I forget what her name was, Sheila.
Scott?
Yeah. The house on the second house north of Gulfview.
Yeah.
It's a fortress. It's awful.
Well, that was led through the town. They allowed the walls. That was at the time,
But
they were allowed to do it. Can't
and-
change that.
And then as you go up, I'll tell you where the houses are. As you go up Gulfstream on Middle Road, there was a new house we used to refer to as the Cat Lady.
Right.
That's a two-story.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to Michael Hayes's house. That's a two-story. That's a third house up there. And then there's the big pink house. That's a very big house. And then as you go further north, there's no two-story houses until you get to the corner of Banyan. And then we had the big house on Banyan and Gulfstream, which became a poster child for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next two-story house is the new one next to Katie Orthwine.
That Mal just built? Yeah, south of Katie.
So that's it. And then if you then go down on Polo from Old School, there's nothing between Old School and Banyan. and there's nothing between Old Banyan and Lakeview. And you don't get anything until you basically get down to Palm Way, and there's a small two-story house there. So if you were on Palm Way and driving east, you drive into the house. And then
That's it.
you continue. The next house is also a two-story house. And then thereafter, they're all one-story houses all the way down to Golfview. So they're very few. And, you know, they sit very nicely on the properties. That they really work well. And that's what we're trying to preserve, is that character.
Well, one quick thought, I hear exactly what you're saying. I don't know what, but if we go back 20 years, 30 years, 20 years, and all the new houses that were built on smaller lots, you know, we're talking the core area, maybe the town can tell us how many of the lots that were built since 1990 were 2 stories. And if I'm making this up, if 4/5 or 2/3 of them are 2 stories, and we want to get rid of massing and stuff, then to make them happy, I think we need to encourage them to have a 1-story house and give them more surface area on the ground to build on, so they're happy. And they can get what the trend they want to do to raise their kids, and give them the incentive. And we're talking different overlays here.
But the most recent houses that have been built on Polo are 1-story.
The one next to you was, and yes, it was a 1-story.
And the one on the big hill with the big tree.
Right, on the big tree, yes, that old house, I agree.
Then, on Banyan, Cody.
But they can find out. You know, we can pick out certain houses.
But it was interesting. A lot of them have been 1-story. So I point that out because I think 1-stories do work. It's not like people don't want 1-stories, and they can work. It's, you know, Seaside built a 1-story next to me, not because he didn't want to maximize value, because
but that's in that overlay. You know what I mean? We're talking the smaller lots we have, they're getting 1-story on it, which is wonderful. We give them more incentive. They might even all do it. That's what
I really don't think that we need to push too hard to incentivize 1-stories, and people will do them. In Blue Water Cove, on the other side of the intercoastal, the development with 14 homes, they have, so the houses on the water are proposed for 2 stories, but almost every other house is a single story. I think they have 1 2-story that they built in the beginning. They have a 2-story, and now they're looking at really all single story. So it shows that there is from a developer value to sell to an end user.
So when
and older people like 1-story houses.
Yeah, they do.
In town, there's a need for all of it.
Sure.
So there's the element of, if you don't want a 1-story building, don't come here. I know that sounds really, you know, sort of, but that's what you're buying into. You know, if you want to move into Gulfstream, that's one of the things that
I absolutely agree with you. That's you're buying into this character, this understated, and I would argue that the value of the land is much the fact that we have 1-stories understated that we haven't converted to what
mansions.
You know, Lake Ida. What's happened to Lake Ida is a shame.
We don't want that.
We don't want that.
No.
And I mean, throughout Delray, they're building these. I mean,
but we're Gulfstream. We're different, and that's why all of us are here.
Yep.
That's why Gary built his beautiful home there.
Right. I mean,
and it works because we're understated.
Gary, you want to swap houses? I'll take yours.
I had no idea that my house was going to be admired as it is. So, one quick question though would be, like, I wonder, like, if along the lines of what you guys are talking about, if I think, Michael and Trey in that spreadsheet, if they did something that said, okay, let's say if it's a 2-story house, you get you get 1 extra foot for the perimeter, okay, and maybe it gets added to the FAR also. If you do a 2-story, you lose 1 foot in the front and 1 foot in the back or something where it has the most impact. And I bet you that would make I think you're talking about a few hundred feet extra. And what Trey said before, where every single application is for the max, I don't think you're going to see any 2 stories if you did something like that. But I don't know if if increasing, or decreasing the setbacks is something that people would consider. But if you did that, you're not going to receive any more 2-story unless somebody just really wants their land.
Well, that's another tool in our toolbox, and I think we should have it on the list and consider that. Maybe so let's just put it on the list. But I think it's evolving that I said we try to finish by 10. I think we should. I think we've defined what are the overlays. I think we've defined our approach to create incentives for 1-story and disincentives 2 stories. And so let's just sort of paint that picture. And then the next time we meet, we got to follow up on some things. Michael's going to be working further on what we discussed previously. On historic, I'd like to sort of define what we're really saying there.
What the criteria.
And then let's lay out what are the incentives to 1-story. I would like to discourage. I would like to increase the setbacks on all 4 sides of a 2-story in the overlay. See what impact that has. I don't know how much we go back.
You mean get more restrictive than now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like to investigate the decreasing the setbacks for a single story? So we incentivize basically what Gary's saying.
Exactly.
1 foot all the way around.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
14 feet instead of 15
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah.
Make it
all the way around.
Yeah.
Make it all the way around, and that you take that around the whole perimeter of the building. That's a fair amount.
If you were the neighbor, you'd far prefer them being 2 feet closer on the downstairs than having a second story.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. By the way, the one thing which is what Michael's working on, we're going to try. I'd like to try to maintain 40% of open space,
As landscape.
because the max is 60% a hardscape or whatever the term is, and so I like to see what the numbers are, because what I don't want is a cement city either. I want
I looked at a house in Delray last week where literally the whole yard was cement. There wasn't any grass. Except there was some artificial grass in front.
But
there was
it's
hardly
like
any
living in a
grass.
city.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything
You
else?
mentioned terracing. We haven't talked about that yet, but
So So when you mentioned all the sort of concrete jungle, so we had skipped over the minimum front yard landscape percentage. That was something that was brought up by the architects that I guess Palm Beach uses. With a lot of these homes that we've maybe heard complaints about, they do have circular driveway, and there's not a lot of plantings in front of the home. So I don't know if that's something that you would want us to look into. We can take the front setback of 30 feet and kind of, try to figure what the landscape percentage is, and see if, again, maybe taking the homes that the committee likes as good samples and see if there's a pattern, and that, a certain percentage of landscaping in the front is preferable to.
So what I'd like to do is bifurcate what discussion we've had so far from that subject. I think that subject applies to all the houses.
Okay.
And also the related was Christine brought up the subject of the height of trees. You know, say we're gonna put in a nice tree and then it comes in at 5.5 feet.
They're pretty mature to start.
Yeah,
They
we're pretty
plan-
strict on
Yeah,
that.
they're
Yeah,
planning from.
I know
Yeah, we're pretty
Malcolm
sure.
regularly.
I mean, you know, they
asks.
spend all this money building a house and it's put in
Yeah,
this
Paul, that's
security.
one of my core celebs.
Mature trees.
Yeah, put it in as it's going to be day one. Don't tell us in 20 years it's going to be.
Yeah,
I won't be around to enjoy
We
it.
got the ARPB fights them all the time.
Yeah.
So you mentioned terracing. Is that something that you wanted to discuss briefly?
You know, just, I think, what we don't want is all of a sudden a building that, you know, you're on the street and all of a sudden it's
Yeah.
up like that.
I'm
And
starting
so
to see that.
I don't know whether it's terracing or how they grade or what, I don't know, but it just can't just suddenly step up. So I don't, I mean, it's, again, it's a secondary
Well, and
thing.
that's gonna show up more, Paul, as they raise that new restriction on the floor level and the.
Yeah.
Well, what did Christine say? They're going to 9 feet. I
It
mean,
may go to 9 feet. What's it, 7 now?
7,
Is it
she's
7?
going to 9.
If
It's
it may
it's
go to
seven,
9.
yeah.
If-
But the terracing applies to all,
Right.
again.
yeah, we can say-
Okay,
can
we
say
got
it from
2
Tim.
minutes left. The
And
first
then-
time I've ever tried to control.
You
a
have
meeting.
done a great job of whittling this down to something
Keep going,
to
Paul.
get to the
Keep going.
committee.
So-
So we
Okay,
need a date.
Date,
So do you want to meet in July? If so, the ARPB meeting
okay.
is the 25th, because you had suggested possibly, since 3 of you are on the ARPB,
And I may not be here.
you may
in
not be
July.
here. Okay,
I may
so,
not be here on the 25th either.
Yeah, I probably won't either, so that's gonna be a problem.
well, it'll be it
Who
will
else?
be a alternates board then.
Okay,
May not even, it may be tough one, Renee. You may want to pull the troops. That's
yeah.
7:25.
so
Okay, I'll
remind
poll.
everybody, I think what we want to do is have this refined, ready to sort of present to the ARPB at a time when our community's here.
Mm.
I guess I don't want for people to think that somehow we did it when everybody's left.
There's nothing in
So
August anyway.
I don't feel a great sense of urgency that we have to have a meeting in July.
And there is no meeting for ARPB
There's
in
no
August,
ARP in August.
so
So let's do it in August. We have an ARPB.
No,
No.
no.
so y'all
You
can
know,
meet
I
in
have no-
August to
I
submit
think
for
We could
September.
our group could meet in August.
Yeah, we could probably meet in August.
Yeah.
That's not as bad as July.
And-
July rough.
Yeah, why don't we plan some date in August?
You want late August?
Mhm.
You want me to send out an email to
Yeah,
get
good,
majority?
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good,
That
okay.
would be great.
Any other business?
Nothing from staff. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
See you next week, Shannon.